Alright, trying something a little bit different today. See if I can record a video podcast on my way to work. I got some thoughts rolling through my head, and there's going to be a way of documenting those thoughts. So, I'm reading Nicholas Carr's book, The Shallows, and in that book, he takes a strong stance against hypertext and links and blogs and things like that, and the summary of his point about hypertext is that it changes the way we read and therefore changes the way we think, and how it provides minor interruptions. And I would say that is an important point, but I think more so, and I'm not done with this book yet, so maybe he goes on to this, but I think more so the point is that the minor interruptions are not as big of a deal, because you get those minor interruptions all the time when you read any kind of reading, and especially even academic reading, where you see a cited source and you consider if you've read that source, or maybe what that person has to say, or maybe you go flip to the end of the text and see what the title of the source is, things like that. But I think what's more problematic is that what the hypertext actually allows you to do is leave that page. And so when you leave the page, you leave the prolonged thought. And so the minor interruptions are not as big of a deal. It's the major interruptions, the interruptions that happen when you actually leave a particular page. And I'm having a lot of discussions about this with several different people. One of the things that some people are arguing is that this actually makes us better readers, and it holds people accountable and things like that. And while I agree, let's not put blogging in the same space as academic writing, because most of the stuff that people are referencing or linking to is not an academic or a research-based article. They're linking to another blog who explains their point better, or provides a little bit more information about what they're talking about, which is useful, but it's not the same as saying, research says this, and then pointing to the research study that says X, whatever X is. And so there's one point, that the blogging is not academic writing. And while it's nice that people are trying to provide more context, what it does is it actually seems to be causing people to leave the prolonged thought. And in a lot of ways, blogging in general results in less prolonged thoughts. And so the thoughts are shorter, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's good to be succinct. But at the same time, if you're not developing thoughts and you're expecting your reader to do a lot of inferring, your point is not as clear, and that's just part of the medium. And so I think what this gets back to what Carr's main message, I think, is the same as McLuhan with the medium is the message. And so I think what Carr is trying to do is not to say don't hyperlink. I think what he's trying to say is consider what hyperlinking does to your mind as well as the mind of your reader. It's not a simple, oh look, I'm providing more information, because that's just focusing on the good sides. And there's a long tradition of people questioning media and thinking about, okay, well, what are the downsides of this medium, and what are the good things? Because there's plenty of good things. I had one guy forward me, a friend of mine forward me a site where they talk about how they're going to, how in their experience, they find the hypertext to make them a better writer, and it holds them accountable and things like that, as I already alluded to. And I can understand why they are saying, well, my experience is this, because the way that Carr writes is very experiential. He says, well, when I found myself reading and I found that I couldn't do this, and so he very much uses himself as an example. And I've had a real problem with things like that in the past. For example, Dan Tapscott uses his kids as an example of these quote-unquote digital natives. And I have a real problem with that, because Dan Tapscott's kids may not be the majority of kids as far as their digital native abilities. And this whole idea of a digital native is ridiculous, because people have to learn. And so learning is a construct. Learning about being a digital citizen and learning how to use these technologies, all stuff that happens as part of your learning process. And just this little side note about digital natives, most of these quote-unquote digital natives are really bad at technology. They think they're really good at technology because they know how to navigate Facebook. And they think they're really good at technology because their parents are even worse at it. But just because they can access technology and they're comfortable with technology does not mean that they are experts in technology. So let's get past that. Now, back to Carr. His main point is that, or the problem with Carr is that he uses a lot of his own experience in his writing to make his point. But really all he does is introduce his points that way. One thing about Carr is that he has a lot of research, and I've looked at some of his bibliography or references or whatever you want to call it, and they're legitimate, academic, peer-reviewed articles in which people who, and I know some